Hello and welcome to this quick video about the ports tab in things like Betaflight and iNav. Now, for those of you that are relatively new to this, you might start playing with the ports tab and find that you do something, and when you save and reboot, the port configuration has been completely deleted, reset to defaults if you will. And that is something that happens occasionally if you try and set an incorrect setting for the ports tab, either for an individual port or for multiple ports. Now, I've had this issue with a number of subscribers, and I was actually helping a Patreon with it just the other week. So I thought, okay, I'll actually make a video, so hopefully this will avoid other people falling into the same trap. So on a flight controller like this Matek F405 wing, there are lots of UARTs, or universal receive transmit ports, and they are kind of clustered all around this thing. Now, older flight controllers, things like the F411 based flight controllers, typically only had two hardware UARTs, and this is where I tend to see people getting into problems. Or smaller flight controllers that are more compact tend to sacrifice some of the pinouts. However, wing flight controllers like this that I use in wing builds all the time, for iNav in particular, have lots and lots of connections. So let's plug this into the computer and let's have a very quick look at what this looks like in iNav. However, it's going to be the same for things like Betaflight as well. So on the computer, I'll click connect, and then if we go into the ports tab, we can see here that we have all of these UARTs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Now the USB VCP stuff at the top, that's a special port that's designed to allow us to talk to the computer. So that VCP port is actually the one that's sending MSP telemetry stuff over the USB cable. So we don't want to mess with that one, because that's the one that's actually going to allow us to talk to the flight controller. However, the other ones here, UARTs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, are all these hardware UARTs that have pins on the flight controller, and this one at the bottom is soft serial. Now, soft serial has appeared because in the configuration tab I have enabled soft serial ports. Now, you don't have to have these on. In fact, if you're not going to use them, I would turn them off. It's an overhead on the CPU that you don't need. The challenge is with flight controllers that only have a couple of UARTs, you almost always end up having to use soft serial ports for something or other. And I really hope that iNav continue to support the soft serial stuff for the foreseeable future. However, I suppose if they're going to retire support for things like the F411 based flight controllers that have the limited hardware UARTs, then you kind of get rid of the problem that way, I guess. So let's just go back into the ports tab and let's just have a quick look at this. Now, the way it works is that each of these ports, so here's UART 1, can only do one thing at once, and this is where people get into trouble. So if I just tab into the wiring diagram for this flight controller on the Matek website, we can see here that Matek are very good, and they kind of show you how to set up these things on the flight controller. So you can see here that serial receiver should be UART 2, GPS should be UART 4. So if we go back into iNav, UART 2 is set for serial receiver, GPS is going to be set for UART 4, and then we can save and reboot. And when it comes back up, because that's a valid configuration that the flight controller is happy with, then the ports tab will still look exactly the same. There's the GPS, there's smart port, there's the serial receiver. A common issue that I see is, particularly when you don't have this many UARTs and you're trying to do too much stuff, is trying to set up one serial port for two things. So let's, for example, say that I want the GPS to be on UART 1. So let's take it off there and let's put it on to UART 1. However, I've still got MSP turned on. So I'm telling the flight controller that I want one UART to do two jobs. That is not a valid configuration. If I now click save and reboot, the flight controller will check that ports configuration, find that it's invalid, and delete the entire ports configuration so that we lose those settings. So now everything's disappeared. We're back to defaults. So the GPS stuff that we have set's disappeared. Things like the smart port that was down here has disappeared. So it's deleted everything. And this is a very common issue that I see all the time. Each of these UARTs that are on here can only do one thing at once. It can either be for MSP, it can either be for one of these telemetry systems, or a serial receiver, or a sensor, or a peripheral. You can only have one thing connected to each. Now, there are a couple of weird situations where, because of the pinouts, the flight controller does some funky stuff. So, for example, things like needing soft serial turned on. So things like S-bus receivers only use a receive pin, but using the transmit pin to do things like telemetry. Occasionally, you'll have weird stuff like that as well. But this is why, most commonly, if you try and do something weird, like have lots of MSP stuff turned on as well and save and reboot, there's a very good chance that the flight controller will take a look at that configuration file, realize that the ports setup you're trying to do is invalid, and just delete the whole thing. There we go, it's deleted everything. So how do you find what a valid configuration looks like? Well, one of the big ways is to follow the videos that myself and other people make on places like YouTube. However, one of the big tips is always follow the connection wiring diagrams on places like the manufacturer's manuals. So for here you can see the GPS and compass has to connect to RX4 and TX4. That is UART4. And if we look down here, UART4 is absolutely connected to GPS. Don't try and get too carried away with this. Occasionally you will try and do things like try and use a flight controller in a situation that it actually isn't very good for and you need more ports. My advice would be, in those situations, go and treat yourself to a new flight controller. Get one that has more ports attached so you can use them for all of the things that you want. But hopefully that's helpful for those of you that bump into this problem. Again, it's something that I see a lot in both Betaflight and iNav configurations, particularly on flight controllers that are an awful lot more smaller and compact, where you're trying to be creative, let's put it that way, about how you use the smart ports and also things like the UARTs to get all the peripherals connected to the flight controller that you need. If the configuration isn't valid, then iNav or Betaflight will just delete it. It won't tell you what's invalid, it'll just bin it, which is a bit of a sad thing. It doesn't let you know that's what's going on. But if you ever see that, then it's an indicator that you just need to take a moment, step back, and just have another think about how you're trying to set up your ports. Thank you for watching the video. If you watch my videos and find them useful, then please take a moment to hit the like and subscribe button. It helps the channel a lot. If you really like what I'm doing here, you can become a Patreon and support the time I spend helping others and get access to lots of exclusive benefits. Link is in the video description. Remember that all the videos on the channel are organized into playlists, so you can easily use those playlists to find all the videos on a subject that you are interested in. Add Painless 360 to your searches on Google and YouTube, and it'll help you find my content for any particular topic. Thanks again for watching, and as always, happy flying.